Good morning, Dark Horse. Happy bloody Tuesday. We are down quite a bit on ES. And I think one of the first things we should do today, we're not down quite a bit on the ES. We're down 1%, which is a lot, but it's not usual that we kind of see ourselves trading already outside of our IV walls before we even get to New York session open. I wonder what necessarily caused this aggressive dump. I don't know if you guys traded yesterday, but you may have saw that yesterday we did have our PMI, um, which essentially measures like whether there's expansion or contraction in the manufacturing industry. So this is like purchasing managers in the industry are saying like, hey, like, um, are we seeing like good economic health or bad economic health based on purchase order data? And so, anyway, yesterday at 10 a.m., there was a forecasted estimate of the manufacturing PMI to come in at 49.4, which is weaker than what I would say most people would prefer. People would mostly prefer above 50. And then that PMI number did come in lower than the estimate at 48.7. So that was, I would probably say, bad, or I mean, it was bad data, right? Their forecast was pretty low, and then the actual came in even lower. That did cause a little bit of a drop in the ES yesterday, but we spent most of our day yesterday honestly consolidating. And so I was trying to see what could have potentially driven this, almost 100-point move down on ES overnight. I'm seeing that, there's been a lot of concern from a couple of market, like consultants and market analysts saying that all of this AI rally that we're seeing, people should be really concerned about, which is fair, right? Because I think there's been a lot of jokes out around, the top seven equities in both the ES and NQ are literally just trading billions of dollars between each other. And so I'm wondering if, all of this like AI pumped rally that we've been seeing the past couple quarters is maybe kind of coming to fruition of people being a little bit concerned about, just a handful of companies kind of holding the majority of the wealth in both the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. Um, Also over the weekend, I mean, we saw some positive trade news, honestly. Trump and Xi met over the weekend and pushed back a lot of export controls and a lot of like tariffs and things that we were seeing on like BIS entity lists are getting held off for about a year. So a lot of that stuff honestly was good news. Regardless, we are seeing a relatively weak depth of market this morning. The ES is trading at 81%, which means sellers are in control. Sellers have been in control. I checked the charts very briefly last night, and we were trading around 81% still at that time. And so, um, we've essentially seen float on the ask to the downside, right? We've seen plenty of float on the bid side that kind of pulls price up and up. The interesting part about this downward movement is like it wasn't this really aggressive move, right? It was very measured all throughout the evening. And so, um, disrespected quite a bit of levels, I would say. One of the big levels that I was watching that I wanted to check this morning, that one of the first things we will do when market opens is check our SPY ceiling and floor. So there's a lot of colors going on over here, especially because we're seeing, things like single prints and our IV walls are kind of over here. But the floor on SPY overnight on MoveSpot was marked at 681.30 and obviously translated into ES around, 68.32. The floor is obviously still there, right? Because SPY only kind of updates during regular trading hours, we're not going to see an updated ceiling and floor, but very, very interesting to us for us to just basically smash right through the floor. It's rare that we kind of get there and don't bounce or stay within those levels during extended trading hour sessions. So I will be very curious to see where the floor and ceiling update as we enter into New York session to understand what our potential range could be. Zooming out on this chart as a whole, though, um, there was a little bit of an expectation for a little bit more downside movement on the day. Big thing I want to note here is that our IV walls to the top side, we didn't have a lot of room to the top side. We were basically well within, our top of average range and our max range. It wasn't more than 15 points out of our top of average range before we were going to hit that area where market makers wanted us to stay within. As opposed to the bottom side, our IV wall was well below max range. So I mean, if you were trading ETH yesterday, it wouldn't have been unreasonable to have a downside bias. So if anyone did catch shorts, congratulations for that, honestly. But what we should do now is kind of understand what kind of high probability levels we have for bounces and rejects on our fractals and understand how our vector's been behaving to see if we have any opportunity when our market opens. So let's hop into this. You know what, Dark Horse, you're saying we dumped real hard last night. The one thing I want to say, and I'll disclaim this many times as we're finding our levels. One of the things that I really note is that if we are trading outside of our IV walls, I definitely consider those to be like outlier days. And so I do proceed with elevated caution if we're outside of our IV walls because market makers are already losing money at that point, and there tends to be IV walls tend to flip from like support on the downside to resistance if you kind of break below them. And so there could be some potential, I don't know, shenanigans going on outside of our IV walls. Especially with our levels being relatively disrespected last night, I am going to be proceeding with caution on our trading day today. So the first thing I do really want to look at is our wave one daily. And this one's going to be really interesting to look at too, because similar to last week when we were constantly tracking the higher and higher H values that we were building on that really nice bullish run, we had almost a 100 point move to the downside last night. I'm betting we're going to be relatively extended on the wave one daily. So there might actually be some opportunity to find open states or even low probabilities of continuation to the downside. So let's kind of see where we're trading at right now. So currently on the wave one daily, let me try to zoom this in so we can see it better. The vector is currently trading at 6813.50. We have actually quite a bit of open states. We have three of them here. We have one at 6804, 6798, 6786, 6778. There's a couple things I want to note here that I don't think we've ever really talked about with open states. There's some brackets that we see after our open states, and this is counting the time periods that the open state has been open. And so on the wave one daily, this is really easy to calculate because every single candle is a day. So every single number is going to be a day. So for example, the 6798 has been open for 10 days. The 6778.41 has been open for 16 days. Inversely, the 6786 has only been open for a day. So I'm probably not going to spend too much time looking at the 6786 because this was the open state that we have currently created. 6786.25 is our low of day today. So I will be spending some time probably looking at 6778 and 6798 to see if there's any other confluences in these areas for bounces. One of the things I'll really probably pay attention to is 6778 because that gives us a little bit more room to the downside. So we do have a lot of opportunity here. We also do have vector to note for potential reject areas, but I do really like the wave one daily because we have a lot of opportunity to fill a handful of open states that have been around for 2 weeks, over 2 weeks. Um, so we'll see if we have any other confluences on longer time frames. Interesting to see a relatively dense cluster of open states, though. Okay, so let's go look at our 7 wave 60. Mm. One more thing I want to say about the wave one daily, actually. So yeah, we're down pretty hard here on ES, but we've only made a L1, right? So we've only had one day being back below pivot. So if we would go into our options analyzer real quick to look at what the probability is of making an L2 or like a second bearish day, 54%. So it's not like, we have to go back up. We have to go back up. Like the odds of continuing down are actually pretty high. Like it's in a relatively neutral zone. So um, I'm not going to be betting on like equity buy-ins or anything like that anytime soon. So, okay, back to our 7 wave 60. Let's zoom in on this. Okay. Ooh, we are nice and down on the 7 wave 60. Yeah, we love that. Okay, so similar to the wave one daily, right? We have this open state at 6786.25. This is the open state that we created during our extended trading hours session. So, while I like it, because we've just created it today, I'm probably not going to spend too much time paying attention to it today. Um, we could very well be making continue to make lower lows with our DOM continuing to trade pretty weak at around 80%. I'm not going to be marking this 86.25 level um, just because it's so recent. One of the things we can know is that our vector is currently trading at 68.03. Um, the other thing that we can note though is that 67.86 is at our 5% odds. There's another big thing we should be tracking though on this particular level is that we have a lot of blank space to the downside. Looking at these clusters over here, we do have one little supportive cluster at 67.72, but otherwise we have space all the way down to 67.15. And so potentially supporting our thesis of a lot of ask float to the downside and sitting outside of our IV walls, there could be some potential for us to float even further down on the day. Um, we're going to keep looking to see if we can find some open states on lower time frames that are maybe more aligned with some of the open states that have been open for about 2 weeks on the wave one daily. But this is a little bit concerning on the 7 wave 60 that we have this much blank space to the downside with no sort of supportive zones like an open state or a low percentage probability of continuation, for example. Okay, so let's look at the 20 wave 15. Going more into our midterm timeframes here. What a surprise yet again, right? We are overextended to the downside. 67.8625 is yet another open state that we created during ETH, so I'm not going to spend too much time paying attention to it. What I'm going to try to do here, I want to load a few more days. We're so overextended. We have a little bit of concern of float. I want to see if there's any other potential here to the downside. And look, we're not really seeing it. A lot of blank space to the downside as well. Look, we've got this one resistive cluster here, 67.75. Then we have room all the way down here to 67.18. Now, here's my question. Do we think it would be completely unreasonable to build a bounce zone all the way down from 67.15 to 67.18? Our 7 wave 60 minute had that 2% odds at 67.15. We have one little resistive cluster at 67.18 on the 20 wave 15 minute. Let's just go look at ES and see how far down that actually would be. 67.15. Whoa. That would be some movement. I'm not going to mark that because, I mean, we could mark it as like a hot girl level, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think if we can make it all the way down there in one day. That seems pretty crazy. Okay, dark horse, we have the splice levels at 67.31. All right, so we might just be going to the depths of hell today then. Might not be super unreasonable to be marking this 67.15 to 67.18 level. We'll see what our 10 wave 15 minute has. Let me just load a few more days. Let's load 60 days here. Yeah, still no opportunity. Okay. Okay. We'll go to our 10 wave 15 minute. Guess what, guys? It's probably going to be overextended. Ooh, we actually had a revision. Okay, good. This is good. Now, okay, so this is cool. This is a cool illustration. Let's go back to the linear chart so we can kind of compare this. So all of our big time frames have obviously been really overextended to the downside because they're looking at um, such a large move. On the 20 wave 15, we were continuing to see that big extension to the downside because it was looking at so much data. But now that we're looking at our 10 wave, we're looking at a little bit of a shorter time frame that retracement back up has actually allowed for price to revise even at one point above pivot. Currently trading below pivot again, but kind of cool to see that finally on the 10 wave 15 we're not overextended. So now we can see if there's some opportunity. And guess what, guys? 67.13 is a level down here. There's an open state at 67.13.72 and a 1% odds. Let's go be dramatic. Let's go be dramatic and mark this level 67.13 to 67.18. I would be a little shocked if we get there, but it's an interesting level that we're seeing very, very far to the downside. Right now, it feels like a little bit of a waste of time for me to be totally honest to be marking this, but I'm going to mark it because it is a pretty dense zone we've been watching on most of our time frames. How ridiculous does this look? to be marking a zone this far down. We're going to do it. I'm going to mark some notes down here because I'm definitely going to mark notes because I'm going to look at this in a couple days and be like, what was I thinking? Okay, so we have um, clusters on larger time frames, overextension on mid and low time frames. And then we had open state on 10-way 15-minute. Marking it, guys. Looks ridiculous, but we're going to do it. That is the beauty of fractals. And you know what? Maybe this won't be that ridiculous, especially after RTH when we do look at our data to see where our ceiling and floor is. Maybe this isn't super ludicrous. Maybe our floor is going to be all the way down here. Only time will tell. Okay. We got our hot girl level all the way down at 67.13. Let's go look at the 7-way 5-minute. Actually, sorry guys. Let's look at a few more things over here. So on the 10-way 15-minute. So again, we're actually not that overextended yet on this. We haven't have our vector trading at 68.10. We do have a few low percentage of probability over here. But again, guys, I just want to stress, even past the 20% odds, we have a lot of blank space. There's not a lot of clusters forming between 67.98 and really that 67.13 open state that we were looking at. So um, there's nothing I want to mark here because we've only seen one confluence so far on the 10-way 15-minute. Even if we see something on the 7-way 5-minute and the 50-way 1-minute, we might mark something for a scalp. But this is such low density of supportive zones that I would be pretty concerned trying to bounce something over here. We can go back and look at our vectors and really track our vectors today to see if there's opportunity for rejection for continuation down. All right, 7-way 5-minute. Right, so we're trading at about 50% odds right now. Vectors at 68.09. And we see an open state down here at 68.02. And we have one here at 67.86 is a current open state, but I'm not going to pay any attention to it because one, that was the open state that we created during our extended trading hours. And two, we're not really seeing many other confluences. We do have another open state all the way down here at 67.62 at the 1% odds on the 7-way 5-minute. But again, right, because this is the only time we've seen this 67.62 present itself as a level of support, I'm not going to mark this as any sort of high probability zone simply because we're not seeing it on any other time frames, nor are we seeing it on any larger time frames. Let's try to load a few more days on the 7-way 5-minute to see if we can see any other opportunity to the downside as well. So a little bit more, there's one more open state that appears at 67.57. Otherwise, not really seeing any density. I'm not going to be marking any of these simply because they're only existing on one time frame so far. So let's go look at the 50-way 1-minute. The next thing I want to do is just shuffle back through these one more time to see where our vector is, to look for some potential rejection areas on vector cluster this morning. Okay. So 50-way 1-minute, guys, again, this is our smallest time frame. We're seeing, again, that 67.65 level. I don't love 67.65 as a potential bounce area, even though we do see it on both the 50-way 1-minute and the 7-way 5-minute. We have 67.65 on the 50-way 1-minute. And we did have, so that's oil, or sorry, that's gold. 7-way 5-minute. We did have 67.62 as an open state on our 7-way 5. We got two of our lowest time frames showing an open state. Could we potentially look at it for a scalp for a bounce? Maybe. If we go back and look at our chart, 67.62 is just in like this kind of zone beyond everything that we're looking at, especially beyond max trend. This is very, very outlier territory. One of the reasons I'm going to be a little bit picky on picking multiple bounce zones is we've had float to the downside. The potential for us to continue grinding down could be possible when we get into New York session. Anything can happen in New York session, obviously, but I don't feel super comfortable marking this zone because we don't see that 62 level on any of our mid or higher time frames. We can go back through and just double check that we're not seeing anything at 62, but because this is only on the 7 wave 5 and the 50 wave 1, I'm a little bit hesitant to take like a high probability bounce. One thing I will say is if you guys are looking for like scalping, um, you could potentially try this, but I'm not super 62 to 65. Yeah, I'm not super like excited about this level. An open state all the way down to 60 and a half on the 50 wave 1 if you look at 5 days to load. So I'm gonna mark it, guys, just to kind of say that we talked about it. So let's do 60. We're gonna do like 60 to 65 will be the level we'll mark. Let me just copy this and drag this up here. But I'm gonna say it again, right? Like I'm even gonna mark it as a note as like a low probability zone. But this is technically a supportive zone. Um, Low density of open states on our low time frames. Okay, so this is the 50 wave 1 minute and our 7 wave 5 minute. Maybe okay for a scalp. Um, Lots of blank space below. So let's just say that. And the reason I say I don't love this level is because when we have float like this, I think it's really, really easy for people to want to just be like, let's try the bounce, let's try the bounce, let's try the bounce at every level that they can identify. And you can get your accounts chewed up like that, right? If you're like, okay, we have a bounce level here, 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 and here, all of a sudden you're trying to take 5 bounces. And if the ask is floating to the downside, like you're just getting chewed through those levels and you're taking paper cut after paper cut after paper cut. And before you know it, you could easily be down $1,000, $2,000 on your account. And so if we get to this level, if price action is giving us some sort of positivity for saying, hey, we might be able to bounce, you guys can try to take it. Am I going to be taking it during RTH? To be determined. I don't think there's enough density on open states for me to say, like, yes, I love this level. The 67.15 level, I like a little bit more, but we're seeing open states on the low probability timeframes. We may see a little bit of a bounce there. All right, let's go back and look at vector real quick. So on our wave 1 daily, I think it was at around like 68.18. Oh no, it revised. It was let's see. That is such a mess. All those open states are just like right over top of it. Okay. So that's trading at 68.05. Our 7 wave 60 is at 68.03. We're looking at 68.05. I love our vector is nice and tight today. 68.11 is pretty high. I would say 68.03 to 68.05 so far. Let's look at our 7 wave 5. 68.08, 68.10. Okay, so the range is technically 68.03 to 68.11. Let's go mark that real quick. 68.03 to 68.11. Wow, which is really interesting, guys. We're actually in our vector cluster currently. Okay, so I apologize in advance. This is going to get messy. There's so many messy levels down here on Milk's yellow box. I might try to get rid of some things. So current vector is trading at 68.03 to 68.11. The one thing I want to say, guys, though, is right, my disclaimer for anytime we mark vector on our linear chart, it's gonna change, right? We're always looking at vector, especially when we're trying to find an informed entry. And so my recommendation is to really constantly check vector, especially after we open, we want to make sure that we're not, trying to trade off of old data. So I'm going to write here current vector cluster as of 8:52 a.m. EST. A.m. EST. That way, when we actually get into RTH, we can look to see where those are revising. But we're technically seeing we're trading within vector cluster. One of the things I want to look at. So we got ourselves all the way up to 68.18. Let's just go look at where our vector has been on, let's look at our like 20 wave, for example, to see if vector has been acting as supportive lately. It looks like it has. Look, we've been trading at 68.11, 68.08, 66, 68.06, 68.05. So vector has currently been supportive on the 20 wave 15, on let's see how the 7 wave 60 looks real quick. Vector's also looking supportive currently on the 7 wave 60. So there could be potential for Vector being supportive to support upside right now. We're pretty low. Actually, Vector's looking pretty supportive right now. So I'm going to keep an eye on Vector to see where that moves. Um, Especially going to be keeping an eye on the DOM because we are actually seeing strength as we're getting closer to market open. We could see some opportunity for upside out of and off of our Vector cluster because Vector has been trending really, really well. Um, the other thing I want to look at is see how it behaved during this move down. And look at the 7 wave 60. It actually looks really good. Look at this. Here's Vector. It's stair step down. So here's last night. We were at 79, 61, 58. Like that's a really beautiful trend on Vector. We're starting to flatten out on it, but price really, really respected Vector. So the fact that we've broken back above Vector on the 7 wave 60 potentially could give us some opportunity for bounces on Vector as we get into open. So I'm really going to be tracking Vector um, as we go into the day this morning. I might even have a really tiny Vector play to prove a point this morning right now. I might enter something here to bounce off of Vector. Um, I think Vector could be a really good opportunity for bounce areas or rejection. Because again, right, thinking about the workshop that we had on Sunday, Vector is kind of that really dynamic equilibrium of where buyers and sellers are existing. So if we're above Vector, buyers kind of tend to want to get into control. And if we're below Vector, it suddenly acts as resistance as sellers want to be in control. So the fact that we're starting to trend above Vector, especially on the 7 wave 60 minute, gives me a little bit of hope that we might have some bounces, especially into New York session open. So, guys, what do you think? These are some ridiculous levels, in my opinion. Um, we got our high probability bounce all the way down at 67.18, and I'm a little annoyed that it's that far down because I don't know if we're going to get it. We have a little bit of resistance on our very, very small time frames from 67.60 to 67.65. I think this zone is just okay. I think what I'm going to be really doing today during New York session while I'm actively trading is really observing Vector and understanding if we have bounce opportunities or rejection opportunities with Vector. I'm also going to be looking at updated market maker data to understand where our ceiling and floor is to just see what kind of potential of a range we have. But I might try to go for a few more points than our standard 15 today because this is a really, really big range so far. I think there's some pretty good opportunity for pretty decent profit today, especially if we can find some A plus setups. So that's what I got for you guys on ES this morning. We don't really have any news as we get into New York session, so we don't really have to worry about anything there. But otherwise, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Let me know in chat or let me know in Ascend, and I will talk to you guys here in 30 minutes for New York session open. See you guys.